From my earliest memories, I always felt destined to assist others. As a child, whenever I bandaged a knee or soothed a fever, I knew I was on the right path. I'm Charlotte, and this narrative is about how my ordinary journey through the medical world led to an unexpected career in cosmetology, which turned out to be surprisingly impactful. My academic path wasn't marked by glamour. It was forged through sheer determination. University was both an escape and a battleground. I wasn't a top student, but I was tenacious. Nursing was more than just a degree program for me. It was a gateway to truly making a difference. I seized every opportunity, from endless night shifts at a local clinic to volunteering at community health drives, to enhance my resume and ensure my scholarships continued. After earning my degree, I remained in the city. Hospital jobs were plentiful, but I felt something crucial was missing. Then I discovered cosmetology. It might not seem like life-saving work, but helping someone achieve a good skin day can dramatically boost their confidence, especially for those dealing with acne or scars. I worked tirelessly, saved diligently, and eventually, with the help of a sizable loan, opened my own modest cosmetology office in a shared space. It wasn't large, but it was all mine. It was during a rare get-together with friends, those special occasions where you reconnect and everything feels perfect, that I met Jeffrey, a friend of a friend. "So, you're like a nurse or something?" Jeffrey inquired casually, beer in hand and a friendly smile on his face. "Actually, I'm a cosmetologist and I own my place," I responded, bracing for the usual judgment, but finding none. "That's badass. Must be nice to call the shots," he said, genuinely impressed. That night, surrounded by laughter and music, Jeffrey's understanding of my passion and determination struck a chord with me. Life before Jeffrey was straightforward: work, pay bills, and occasionally hang out. But after that night, everything shifted. We began dating, and every conversation and date reinforced the notion that I might not be alone in this journey. Our relationship quickly found its groove. He would send me goofy morning texts, and I would call him during my breaks. Jeffrey worked in tech, often lamenting how his coding efforts were underappreciated. When I met his family, his mother, Mrs. Denise, welcomed me warmly, enveloping me in a hug as if we were long-lost relatives. "Jeffrey hasn't stopped talking about you," she confided during my first visit for Sunday dinner, which was filled with homemade lasagna and amusing anecdotes from Jeffrey's shoeless childhood adventures. Despite his embarrassment, Mrs. Denise's playful teasing showed me a new side of him. In Jeffrey, I found not just a partner, but a true companion who appreciated the hard work and passion behind my unconventional career choice. Our connection deepened, proving that sometimes the most fulfilling paths are those we never planned. Laughter filled the room. It was relaxed, easy, and felt perfectly right being with them. After about a year, Jeffrey and I reached a deeper level of commitment. We found ourselves together nearly every evening, not just at my place, but alternating between our homes. One brisk evening, as we were bundled up in blankets on my small balcony, Jeffrey broke the comforting silence. "Charlotte, I've been thinking a lot about us," he started, his voice hesitant yet earnest. "Oh," I responded, curiosity mingling with a flutter of nerves. He took a deep breath, his fingers intertwining with mine under the blanket. "I know I want to build a real life with you."
What do you think about that?
My heart skipped a beat, though I kept my tone light. "Build something, huh? Like a Lego project? Or more of a Monopoly game?" He laughed softly, squeezing my hand.
Funny.
"I mean a life, Charlotte. Together. Maybe even consider getting a place, something permanent." The proposal both thrilled and terrified me. I'd like that, I confessed, a lot. So, we began dreaming together, not just about cohabitating or the immediate future, but about everything: kids, careers, buying a home. He proposed shortly after that heartfelt balcony conversation. It was an intimate, unpretentious moment, just us, which was perfect. "Marry me, Charlotte. Let's do this for real," he said in a dimly lit room with rain gently tapping at the windows. I agreed without hesitation. It was the easiest yes I'd ever uttered. Wedding planning commenced swiftly thereafter, with Mrs. Denise proving invaluable. She knew exactly whom to call and what to arrange, making it all seem effortless. "You just focus on being happy. I'll handle the stress," she insisted, and I gratefully let her take the reins. Our wedding was simple yet perfect. Close friends and family surrounded us with hope and joy. As I walked down the aisle and saw Jeffrey waiting, his lopsided grin warming my heart, I felt like everything was falling into place. After the wedding, Jeffrey moved into my apartment, the same one I had rented since my early cosmetologist days. We merged our lives, books, dishes, and deciding whose art would decorate the walls. It was a delightful, cozy chaos. In the evenings, we'd sit together at our small dining table, surrounded by laptops and bills, crafting budgets like a seasoned team. "I'll handle the groceries and utilities," Jeffrey said one night, serious as he worked on a spreadsheet. "And I'll keep chipping away at this loan. The sooner it's gone, the sooner we can think about buying a house, and maybe even starting a family," I added, the words heavy with promise and potential. Jeffrey reached across the table to squeeze my hand, smiling. "Sounds like a plan, babe." Everything seemed perfectly aligned. However, as time passed, our relationship with Mrs. Denise began to change. She had been like a second mother through the wedding preparations, but suddenly, I found myself excluded. No more Sunday dinners, no calls. When I questioned Jeffrey, he appeared uncomfortable. "She's just in one of her moods. Her health isn't great. Maybe give her some space," he suggested after another unanswered call. Though I wanted to understand more, the look in his eyes made me hold back.
So I let it be.
A year into our marriage, another issue surfaced. Jeffrey's once steadfast support seemed to wane. Bills started accumulating on my desk, and his contributions dwindled. I found myself covering everything from rent to electricity. One evening, I couldn't ignore it any longer. "Babe, what's going on?" "This is the third month you haven't contributed," I confronted him, bills in hand. Jeffrey turned away, his jaw set with tension. "It's my mom."
She's really sick, Charlotte.
"Hospital bills, medications, it's a lot. I've had to help out." Understanding the importance of family, I nodded, though the weight of our challenges lay heavy between us. "I get it. Family comes first." But deep down, I knew we needed to find a way to manage these new realities together. As our challenges mounted, the strain between Jeffrey and me grew, highlighting the cracks in our partnership. "We're supposed to be a team. You should have said something." I found myself snapping one day, a mix of worry and betrayal tinting my voice. I know. I'm sorry, babe. Just can you handle things a little longer?" "I'll make it up to you, I promise," Jeffrey replied, his voice earnest, almost pleading. So I tightened our belts further. I even called my parents, a conversation I dreaded. "Mom, Dad, I hate to ask, but could you help out this month? Just until we get back on our feet." They sent what they could, never questioning whether Jeffrey was contributing equally. I didn't have the heart to tell them the full extent of our situation. Work became both my sanctuary and my cell. I skipped lunches and packed my schedule with clients, and my Sundays off vanished. I barely saw Jeffrey. He was either at work or caring for his mom. Our apartment felt too large without him. The silence, too heavy. On a rare evening together, I tried to bridge the growing distance. "We're in this together, right? Tell me what's going on." Jeffrey, looking exhausted and thin, merely shook his head. "It's just really bad right now. Mom's fading, and I can't think beyond that." I nodded, swallowing my frustration. "Okay, but remember, I'm here. We're supposed to do this together." Over a year had passed since Jeffrey began to shift his financial responsibilities onto me. During that time, I managed to pay off the loan for my office. Every inch of that tiny room was a testament to the sweat and late nights I'd poured into it. But as my professional dreams solidified, my personal life with Jeffrey crumbled. The constant lack of money cast a long shadow over us. He had taken a second job, promising that it would alleviate some of our financial strain, but if anything, things worsened. Jeffrey was seldom home, and the little money he did bring felt insignificant. One night, as I heard the door creak open well past midnight, I couldn't contain my frustration any longer. I sat at the kitchen table, Bills and overdue notices sprawled before me like a deck of bad luck. "Jeffrey," I started, my voice tight, "we need to talk. This," I gestured at the pile, "isn't sustainable." He sighed deeply, a sound of sheer exhaustion, and sank into the chair opposite me. He looked as run down as I felt. "I know it's tough, Charlotte, but I'm doing everything I can. Mom's bills are they're overwhelming." "And what about us?" "Our bills." I shot back, my frustration spiking. "When is it going to be enough?" Jeffrey met my gaze, and for a moment I thought he might finally understand. But then he suggested the unthinkable. "Maybe we could sell your office, just until things stabilize. It would give us some breathing room." I stared at him, disbelief and anger coiling in my stomach. "Sell my office? My dream? That's your solution?" I stood up abruptly, pushing my chair back so it screeched against the tile. Jeffrey flinched but persisted. "It's just until we get back on our feet. I'm out there busting my ass every day and night, Charlotte." "And what, you think I'm not?" My voice rose, sharp and raw. "I built that business from nothing while paying half our bills on my own, and you want me to just give it up?" He stood too, anger flashing in his eyes. "Then what do you want me to do, huh? Let my mother starve? That's not fair, and you know it." We were both yelling now, too far gone to care about keeping it together. The divide between us, once bridged by love and mutual support, now seemed too wide, filled with financial woes and unmet expectations. "I need a partner, Jeffrey, not just a roommate who leaves me to handle everything alone," I said, frustration evident in my voice. We glared at each other, the air heavy with unspoken words and regrets. Without resolving anything, Jeffrey turned and walked away, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. Our arguments became more frequent, each one eroding the foundation of our marriage. Conversations about finances invariably led to raised voices and slamming doors. I started to question whether the man I had married was still there, buried under all the stress and desperation. It was a particularly quiet Tuesday when I decided to head home early after a client canceled at the last minute. I wasn't too upset about it. The extra time was a chance to catch some much-needed rest. As I pushed open the door to our apartment, I was surprised to see Jeffrey frantically ironing his black suit, the one he reserved for weddings or funerals. His actions stopped me in my tracks. "Jeffrey, what's going on? Why are you all dressed up like that?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the hallway, tinged with confusion. He jumped a bit, clearly not expecting me. His face paled, then flushed, a clear sign he was nervous. "It's my mom, Charlotte. She passed away last night. There's the funeral tomorrow," he stammered. The news hit me like a sucker punch. Despite everything, Mrs. Denise had been like family to me once. "Oh, Jeffrey, I'm so sorry. I'll come with you, of course." "No." His response was sharp, cutting through the air. "She didn't want you there, Charlotte. Her last request, she said she never really liked you," he said bluntly, his words cold. I recoiled as if slapped, my heart thumping painfully in my chest. Okay, if that's her wish. It hurt more than I expected, but I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded, stepping away to hide my hurt. Jeffrey didn't say anything more. He just went back to his ironing, leaving me standing there, a whirlwind of grief and confusion inside me. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, thoughts racing. Something didn't feel right. Mrs. Denise and I had our differences, but this seemed too harsh, even for her. The next morning, I watched from the window as Jeffrey left, dressed in a suit, the epitome of a grieving son. Once he was gone, I made a decision. I rescheduled my appointments and drove to Mrs. Denise's house, expecting to find a gathering of some sort, perhaps just the tail end of it. But the street was quiet, too quiet. Her house looked just like it did on any other day. No cars lined up outside, no signs of a wake. Driven by confusion, I went to the front door and, on impulse, rang the bell. The door swung open, and there was Mrs. Denise, very much alive, staring back at me with wide eyes. "You're alive?" I stammered, my heart racing. She took a step back, her face a mask of shock. Charlotte, what on earth? Why would you think otherwise? Jeffrey told me you were. The words tangled in my throat, too surreal to voice fully. Dead, she finished for me, her brow furrowing in confusion and concern. My God, no. Come in, Charlotte. We need to sort this out. Numbly, I stepped inside, enveloped by the familiar smells of her home, a bewildering comfort. We sat at her kitchen table, the same place where we had shared many cups of coffee. I don't understand. He said there was a funeral today. He was so upset, I said, my voice trailing off as I pulled out my phone, the urgency to confront Jeffrey growing. Just as I was about to make a call, my phone vibrated with a notification that Jeffrey had started a live stream on Instagram. Overcome with curiosity, I tapped the link, my hands shaking. I was shocked to see a live broadcast of a funeral. Puzzled about who could be in the coffin, especially since Jeffrey's mother was right next to me, we decided to investigate further. We quickly found the funeral location in one of the comments and set off. During the drive, my mind raced through the past few years, trying to untangle the web of lies Jeffrey had spun. I turned to his mother. He told you I didn't want to see you, right? She nodded, her voice laced with betrayal. Yes, and I believed him. I've been sending him money because he said you were buried in debt, that creditors were chasing you. I was stunned. That's not true. He told me you were ill and wanted nothing to do with me. He claimed visiting would be too stressful for you. It became clear he had been manipulating us both, setting us against each other. We drove the rest of the way in reflective silence, each of us lost in our thoughts until we arrived at the cemetery. It was exactly as one might imagine, solemn and subdued, with mourners in black scattered about. We parked a bit away to avoid drawing attention and approached discreetly, staying on the outskirts, but close enough to observe. I noticed Jeffrey standing by a grave, surrounded by people I didn't recognize, all consoling him. Curious yet cautious, we moved closer to some attendees who seemed less engaged. Mrs. Denise gave me a slight nudge, and I cleared my throat before addressing a mournful-faced woman nearby. Excuse me, I'm terribly sorry for your loss. We just heard and came as soon as we could. May I ask who passed away? I kept my voice low and respectful. The woman's sad eyes met mine. Oh, thank you. It's my niece. She battled her illness bravely. Just a year into her marriage, and now this tragedy. My heart skipped a beat. Your niece was married? I asked. She nodded towards Jeffrey. Yes, to that young man there. They were deeply in love. It's heartbreaking. The truth hit me like a wave, each revelation a fresh betrayal. I felt Mrs. Denise tense up beside me, her breath catching. He's been leading a double life, I said, the words bitter in my mouth. Mrs. Denise covered her face briefly, then looked at me with fierce determination. We can't let him get away with this. He's lied, cheated, and made fools of us both. We decided to wait and observe from a distance, blending in with the mourners as Jeffrey played the part of the grieving husband, a performance that, under other circumstances, might have been commendable for its audacity. After the ceremony, we followed him discreetly as he joined the grieving parents of his wife at a large, elegant house, the doors wide open to welcome guests. We parked a little further away and walked up quietly, blending into the flurry of arriving condolences. Inside, we stayed just out of sight, catching snippets of conversations that chilled me to the bone. He's like a son to us now, the deceased woman's father was saying, his voice heavy with emotion. After our daughter's tragic passing, we decided to leave everything to Jeffrey. Our house, our business, believing it was her wish. Overwhelmed, Jeffrey's voice cracked with emotion. Thank you. I lost my parents years ago, and having a family again means everything to me. Suddenly, unable to hold back any longer, Mrs. Denise stormed into the room, her voice cutting sharply through the quiet mourning. And when did I supposedly die, Jeffries? The room fell silent, all eyes turning towards us. Jeffrey's face shifted from grief-stricken to ghostly pale, his eyes widening in shock. I followed Mrs. Denise, my anger surfacing. Yeah, Jeffrey, what is going on? How could you get married again? Did you forget about your wife? The deceased woman's parents turned from me to Jeffrey, their confusion morphing into horror. What is she talking about, Jeffrey? Married to hers? Jeffrey stuttered, his composure crumbling under the heavy gaze of our accusations. It's not what it seems. I can explain, but his lies only fueled the father's anger further, his voice booming with fury. Jeffrey, desperate, pleaded with the parents, please understand. I was trying to sort everything out. Mrs. Denise snorted in disbelief, her face marked by anger. By faking your mother's death and marrying another woman while your wife is still very much alive. Jeffrey looked at me, his eyes pleading. Charlotte, I'm sorry. I got into serious debt with very dangerous people. I thought I could resolve it before it escalated. The grief of the deceased woman's mother turned into outrage. Get out of her house. We will be contacting our lawyers. You will return every single penny. On the front lawn, as Jeffrey was led out by the father, Mrs. Denise delivered a final blow. I never want to see you again. You are no son of mine. Jeffrey fell to his knees, crying, please don't abandon me like this. They'll kill me. I just need a chance to make things right. I watched, numbed, as he reached out to us, his tears streaking down his face. But it was too late for words. I turned away. Any lingering affection I might have felt withering away in the harsh reality of his deceit. The next morning, as Jeffrey's deception unraveled publicly, I sat across from my lawyer, Lisa, a highly recommended and steely-eyed professional. So, he forged my signature on divorce papers? I asked, still trying to grasp the full extent of Jeffrey's betrayal. Lisa nodded, her expression serious. Exactly, and that forgery allowed him to remarry legally. We have a clear case for fraud. By the afternoon, I was at the police station, detailing everything to a sympathetic officer who assured me they would take the matter seriously. True to their word, justice moved swiftly. Jeffrey was conditionally convicted of document forgery within weeks. During this whirlwind, I also sought financial restitution for the years I'd unknowingly supported his dual life. Between my claims and the lawsuit filed by the parents of his second, late wife, Jeffrey's carefully constructed facade of success crumbled spectacularly. He paid a steep price, both financially and morally, and his assets were liquidated to cover the settlements. With his reputation in ruins, Jeffrey fled the country, still haunted by the debts that chased him. With the recovered funds, I began to rebuild the life he had nearly destroyed. After receiving the funds from the legal settlements, I channeled my energy into revitalizing my cosmetology business. I invested in new equipment, added a fresh coat of paint, and brought on 3 new employees. It felt like a true renewal, a step away from the wreckage Jeffrey had left in his wake. Amidst this period of rebuilding, life surprised me with an unexpected twist. I discovered I was pregnant. The news stirred a mix of emotions, intertwining fear with joy. When Mrs. Denise learned about my pregnancy, her response was nothing but supportive. Charlotte, this is wonderful news. Please, let me help. Let me be a part of this child's life. Heaven knows, after everything with Jeffrey, I need something positive to focus on, she expressed over the phone, her voice radiating warmth and steadfast support. Mrs. Denise's support didn't stop with kind words. She went as far as to include me and my unborn child in her will, naming us as her sole heirs. It was more generosity than I could have ever imagined, and it cemented our bond, a bond not formed by blood, but through shared struggles and perseverance. We often spent our afternoons together, planning for the future. We discussed nursery decorations, what lessons we would teach the child, and envisioned the joyous days ahead. The betrayal that once brought so much pain had unexpectedly paved the way for new beginnings. In these moments, I found comfort and a sense of peace in the resilience of our forged family.